and welcome back to the Talent Pieces podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Delcid. And here, we talk all about talent and culture for entrepreneurs, startup founders, and business leaders looking to scale their companies effectively. If you find today's session helpful, don't forget to share it with fellow entrepreneurs and follow the Talent Pieces podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks again for joining the Talent Pieces podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure to have Maija Ehlinger. You got it right? Oh my God, so bad at pronunciation, but very happy to have you here, editor in chief of Hypepotamus. Hypepotamus. I got that
You
one
got
right
that
too.
one. Yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
All right, so thank you for being here. We're very excited to have you and just making time for this conversation.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here. Excited for the chat today.
Absolutely. So, I always like to start this conversation, but just tell us who Maya is, how it started. How did you move from LA to a kind of what got you into this beautiful city? Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career.
Absolutely. So I'm born and raised in Southern California, outside of Los Angeles. And I ended up coming to Atlanta for the first time and for college. So I went to Emory University, and actually coming to Atlanta for freshman year was the first time I had ever stepped foot in the South. It's very different. I remember walking out of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and being hit by humidity and feeling like I couldn't breathe and thought, what have I done? Why did I choose to come here? But it ended up being the best decision I could have made in my life. Emory opened up a lot of doors, and Atlanta opened up even more doors for me. I studied history, but while I was at Emory, I got to be part of a really cool media startup where I actually started our first YouTube news show for campus. And that kind of grew into several different YouTube shows that I produced and edited. And that got me really excited about, what was going on in the city of Atlanta, how Emory was interacting with the city. But most importantly, it got me really excited about the world of journalism. I kind of cut my teeth in this really entrepreneurial way of saying, I love making content. I love talking to people and getting their stories, and how can I help share their stories? So from kind of the beginning of my time as a journalist, I've had kind of this entrepreneurial kind of thread throughout it. So whether that was launching some unique kind of early YouTube shows, back when that was very innovative, now 14 years ago, to, freelancing around, trying to build my own kind of freelance startup empire, if you will, kind of figuring out how to navigate all of that, to coming to Hype, which has been an incredible journey. I joined in 2020. Hype has been around now for more than a decade, and I joined at the height of the pandemic, July 2020. And it was an awesome opportunity to kind of bring together my passion for startups and the entrepreneurial lifestyle and my love of telling stories.
I'll definitely keep it as hype moving forward. So I can stick with the right discussion. You know what I love about your story is, first, you have to really come to Atlanta as kind of an outsider to understand the real definition of Southern hospitality. Like, how you really get in love with the city, with its people, and like just the vibe, right? Like, people, it's great here, and the way they support you, so you can become part of the city. It's great. At least that's kind of what I've seen in my personal experience as well.
Absolutely. I didn't, when I came here for college, I don't think I was planning on staying. I think,
Okay, my 2 3 years, I'm not.
yeah, I don't think that was ever the plan. But when I started looking for jobs and opportunities, people were like, you have to go to New York, you have to go to LA, and have to go to DC if you want to pursue these goals of yours. And, I got these incredible opportunities in Atlanta. And I think it was, people are so willing to help you out here. It was really me going to the Atlanta Press Club events where I got my first opportunities. It was talking to people in startups who said, hey, I need help telling these stories. I need help. You know, can you help me with my content? That gave me opportunities. I'm not saying that can't happen other places, but in Atlanta, there's a community of people that helped me start.
I want to say it's very intentional, and I've also mentioned this while speaking with Ali Merritt in one of the previous sessions, which is the superpower of the Thailand ecosystem. It's summarized in one question: How can I help you? Everyone has that question, and it's really authentic. Like they really mean to help you and see how they can, you know, add value to whatever you're trying to do. Um, Now for Hype, I want to say I moved here in February 2021 when Puzzle started, and since then I know Hype already existed. Yeah, I want to say that's because the during the pandemic we're trying so much to get connected, wanting to know what was going on, and I think you guys did an amazing job when trying to cover the startup ecosystem while everyone was working from home, which is more challenging. Like things will continue to move, investments will continue to have, companies will continue to start, but in not this very public sale that we're so used to even nowadays.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about how was those early days trying to cover startup events during COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking back, timing was a bit wild for me to join on many reasons. I had done business reporting prior to joining Hype, but I had never done venture capital reporting. I did not know anything about it, really. So and yeah, as a reporter, half of your day, especially early on in your career, is just getting coffee with people, getting to know sources, and really just like asking questions of people, being like, I need to understand this beat, as we call it in journalism. I need to understand the industry that I'm covering. And in COVID, that was obviously impossible. I could have Zoom calls with people, but it was a lot of reaching out to people. I mean, I spent so much time on LinkedIn trying to figure out, okay, who are the general partners of funds that I need to know? Or, okay, what's the layout of the land here to try to understand it? So in the very beginning, Hike has always been so focused on events, and that's how one to find out about great startups. So for me coming in at that time, it was definitely a challenge. But going back to your point about how can you help that mentality? I was so lucky that there's so many people who were fans of Hype before, who when I came in and there was this transition period, they were reaching out to me saying, how can I help? And they were the people, including people like Family Merit, people at Startup Atlanta, who helped me navigate and say, okay, these are the people to watch. And I had so many conversations early on where I was like, I need help me understand this world. Well, yeah, who are the movers and shakers? How does this all happen? I had people who I would literally sit down and be like, hey, I need you to explain to me how a term sheet works, because if I'm going to be talking about this and reporting on it, please help me so that I'm asking the right question. And across the board, the Atlanta startup ecosystem as a whole was so, uh, you know, helpful on that learning curve for me.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that are even signing term sheets that don't really understand what it's all about. It all the complexity it takes in the venture capital work. Like to your point, it's great how everyone is willing to sit down with you and let me explain you. Let me show you how it's done, so we can have the right angle on making the right questions. Is it? I'm not a journalist myself, but I'm as a salesperson. I think it's always about for you to be a successful salesperson, you need to fully understand the product that you're selling so you can have the right answers when your client will come up, right? I'm assuming reporting it's no different where you need to have all the arguments around what you're covering so you can get the best of whatever you're covering. Sound like did I agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's so many. What's cool about being a journalist is I feel like every day I get to learn something new and kind of jump into someone else's shoes for a bit. When I'm reporting on somebody, I'm I've never worked at a fintech. I've never built a fintech. I know nothing about aerospace, but on any given day, I get to say, okay, I want to sit down and really try to understand this person and the industry that they're working in. And I do feel like if we could jump into people's shoes for a couple, for several hours as I'm interviewing them, trying to figure it out. And like, I think there's so many skills that whether you're marketing or sales, or even, kind of product management role, there's so many things that the skill sets overlap with journalism because you have to quickly dissect what's happening, try to understand um, where a person is coming from so that you can ask the right questions. I'm never going to be able to speak at a very technical level to somebody who is, advanced coder who's built something. Um, but my job is to distill what they're building to the wider audience.
Translate programming or venture capital to plain English.
Exactly.
Everyone can really understand what's going on and why it is a big deal.
And, for me, my guiding star is always, and this is something you hear a lot in business journalism, is you say, okay, if what I'm writing, could my grandmother understand it? And would it be interesting to this person who might not have any technical background, no business background, but is it interesting to them? And does it help them understand a little bit more about the world that we live in? So.
Hey there, quick break. If you are enjoying today's conversation, don't forget to hit subscribe and give us those 5 stars. It will help us grow a lot. Now, back to our conversation.
No, it makes perfect sense. And one of the funniest part is whenever I started my business, it and I try to explain to my mom and my dad is like, why are you really doing that? I'm like, well, we're a nearshore staffing firm. We hire engineers. And my mom will always be like, are you a call center? And I'm like, no, mom, we're not a call center. We're a nearshore staffing firm and we hire software engineers. And I was laughing at her. And she's like, sounds like a call center. And I'm like, okay. Like, yes. Then I was like, okay, let me redefine my strategy on how I am explaining what we do. So it got into a point where my mom was like, okay, now I know what you do. It's like, perfect. That means my messaging got there. And sometimes, we're not really that conscious on how we define or make a space between, okay, this is a fancy way of saying it, but this is also a clear way of explaining what we do. And we need to find that balance between, yes, you're innovating and you are a big deal because of what you're trying to solve, but at the same time, explain it to the greater audience so they can know exactly what you're trying to solve for them. So I guess it's very similar in journalism. Well, you're talking to the big deal and complex, innovation startups and translate this to the greater audience.
Absolutely. And I think, some, um, speaking high level, I think some industries are better at explaining it to the wider audience than others. By nature, I think B2B SaaS companies, they're not selling to the wider audience. They have a very cheap product. And so they don't have to explain it to the person on the street. They need to explain it to someone who's going to buy their software that's might be sitting at Atlanta Tech Village or sitting at a big office. So sometimes talking to them, I have to pull it out of them a little bit more and say, okay, your product is great for who? Or your product is great because why? Uh,
Have you gotten to a point where they don't have an answer for that?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Uh,
But like, no, but look, that's how you actually build a startup that is going to be successful. Is you are very clear on who you're selling and what you're selling. So, but sorry to
yeah, I think you know, Hype, we love to cover early stage startups, and we want to be someone's first time that they're in the news and help them kind of on that journey to getting more customers, finding the right investors, and growing in the Southeast. We want to be part of sharing that story. A lot of times, not a lot of times, I should say, but it's happened. It's happened before. I will sit down with somebody and start, I'm not I think a lot of times people think journalists are there to nitpick or give you gotcha questions. I'm not there to do that. We're a community publication.
Right.
But sometimes if I'm starting to peel the onion back and say, hey, what is it that you do? What is it that you're building? And we get to a point where, okay, you really don't have a product. It's
Yeah.
it can be you know, it can be a frustrating moment, I think, for both people as we're talking.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm always conscious of, I'm not going to be the expert in that industry, so I'm not there to
Question.
question
Right.
whether that's a product that's needed or that I even, that's something that I would use or something that my team would use. Um, but there's also a point in which if you can't explain the product to somebody, are you really ready to have that product out into the world? And I've seen it many times especially the early stages, where talk to somebody and it's clear they don't know what their thing is, and they'll pivot pretty quickly from that.
But that's a great indicator. Yeah? And one of the things that I wanted to cover in this conversation is how do you feel those indicators of what you have seen in the start of the ecosystem? We were talking on one of the sides of it, which is okay, if they cannot explain you, and then they need to work on their messaging or their solution overall, and then you have seen them pivoting.
Yeah.
Then okay, that is kind of a preview of what could happen if you don't have your right value proposition ready to put it out in the market. Now, what have you seen on the other side of the story? Sorry, what have you seen on the other side of the story where um what are those components of startup founders that you have seen again covering from an early stage to then after they become very successful? What are those patterns that you usually think or feel that they have or they share in common?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and I don't think these are just the journalists who would answer this question the same way, but people that really fully understand what product market fit looks like for them and understand who their customers are. If someone is launching a product after launching a product after launching a product, I'm thinking, have you really spoken to your customers? Have you really spent all this time? I think also a sign of success is people building a really scrappy MVP and just putting it in front of people. Um, I think we all hear these stories, and yet we see them continue on where people spend all this time building this beautiful product, and then there's nothing there.
Right.
So I think that is, from a product side, what I've seen success, as people have grown, they've really been intentional about building those early customers. And, I think it's really cool when I hear someone say, you know, and it can be anecdotally, I'm just talking to somebody and they say, oh, yeah, I've been using this software and I've been, using it for a year and I've been helping them iterate and it's really cool. And they're coming to me as customers and saying, you need to check out this person because that to me is like ding ding. Okay, you've got customers saying this is legit and I'm using this and I've seen it grow. So I think to distill that very long-winded answer, people really work on understanding their customers at the very beginning. Um, I think when I think about like the leadership skills that I see, you know, I've seen really successful people who are serial entrepreneurs who are always going to be working at a startup. That's their thing, and maybe they've built up their time in the startup world, and then they become founders. I've seen that be successful. I've also seen people build really good corporate careers, and then they say, "Hey, I know this one specific thing that I can fix. I can make this, a venture backable product." And they start their career. I think so. You can have a corporate background, you can have a student background. The main thing is that you understand your customers so completely, and you're not just putting something out there in the world because you think
That'd be cool.
it's going to be cool. There's a lot of
Yeah.
cool things out there that don't make money.
Absolutely agree. So, one of the first things is then product market fit. very important. And then there is this leadership entrepreneurial mindset. And I want to say, like, you're absolutely right. It doesn't necessarily it's attached to a specific career background. Like you can come from corporate America, or you can have always worked for a startup. And at the end of the day, it's more red kind of DNA that you have. Like you want to take risks, sometimes not calculated risk or you firmly believe that you have a solution for it. What will you say it's a cultural component? And by culture, one of the things that I pose along the podcast is the culture the companies have, the talent that they have access to. So what have you seen on those aspects?
Yeah, I think, for one thing, it's a true understanding of the industry that you're in and bringing in people and building a team that understands that industry. Talking about people who are from corporate joining in, sometimes that can be really great if you're building a B2B SaaS company because you speak that language, you are in those meetings. Um, and then you can build your team around that. What I think is interesting is, and I don't have a way to kind of test this because I wasn't here pre-COVID. Um, but what I think is very interesting is, since I joined Hype in the height of COVID, it's a remote first world.
Yes.
I've seen companies that have pivoted to really focusing on in person.
Right.
Now with their teams, I've seen teams that are like, we're fine being remote at office. Yeah, what's the office? What we are, yeah. Um, and every iteration in between that. So I've been asked frequently, like, how, is in person better? Are all startups coming in person? Are all people remote? I don't think that matters. I think what matters is that you have something that works for your team and you have systems in place to say, we're building a cohesive team, um, and you're on the same mission.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point that you're putting there, which is the mission and the core values that the company have. It's kind of that glue that will stick you around, even if you are not in office, even if you're like remote or you're in a different country still. If you kind of have those same beliefs, it's like, okay, I am behind this core values in terms of I believe what they do or trying to solve, and therefore I'm all in.
Yeah. I've seen teams that, they have two, three co-founders or kind of executive team members who I've spoken with, who had gotten a good rapport with, and realized, oh, this person is in London. This person is in LA. This person is in San Francisco. But there's a cohesive, the teams that stand out are the ones where it's like, well, we know that Atlanta, yeah, for example, we're building a Southeast based company. We want talent here. You can still have talent from anywhere, but people are coming in and making it very intentional that like this is a Southeast based team.
Yeah, and to your point of talking to four different co-founders or their executive team, they all sound the same in
Yeah.
a way of, okay, this is the voice of our company. This is what we have in common. Like, therefore, this is the message that we want to deliver. And I think that's fascinating, right? Especially because we come from so different backgrounds, and yet we find those common pillars that will drive success in the long run. Um, so that's exciting. So, what do you think? What's next for Hype?
Yeah, we're continuing to try to grow our audience. And what is really fun about being a journalist is, we're talking earlier about how startups have to really understand their customer. Your customers are readers. So we always are thinking about how can we create content that resonates with our audience. So we're based in Atlanta. We cover the Southeast region. It's been really fun this year to kind of grow our audience in places like Nashville and Tampa and Birmingham, and try to intentionally build something to show the Southeast has such a great ecosystem that is growing. And so, yeah, our focus is on, how can we get great partnerships and continue to build the community and showcase what a tech community is here and what it can look like moving forward. The city has put up some pretty aggressive goals on what the startup community needs to, or what they want the startup community to look like. So it's our job to to follow those and say, okay,
Made it. We're there. Oh, is there going
or what steps are needed
Yes.
For the city to meet its growth goals.
I know it makes perfect sense, and the South has something to say, and very important. But I again, I really appreciate you making the time. I really appreciate what Hive is doing for the startup community in my particular experience or my journey as an outsider, not just to Atlanta, but the United States overall. What you guys are covering helped me a lot understand what was going on and how to navigate the startup ecosystem. So I'm very thankful for that, and I'm sure our audience will be very thankful. So thank you very much for making the time for this conversation.
Thank you.
All right, bye everyone.
And that's it for today's session. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow the Talent Pieces podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You will help us grow by sharing this podcast with fellow founders and entrepreneurs. If you have any questions or topics that you would like us to cover, feel free to leave them in the comments.